We're talking about Tina Turner today. Welcome. It's makeup and music. This is the final look. We used some Devinah Multichromes and some Copacetic Multichromes, and we created this with these big old lashes, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I tried some new things out, but yeah, so if you're excited to hear about Tina, please like, comment, share, subscribe. I would appreciate it. Love you guys. Let's get into it. Okay. I'm using the e.l.f. Mint Melt Cooling Primer, and I inadvertently found a hack. It looks like that. It's kind of like the Hydro Grip, so I wonder if the Hydro Grip would work the same way. Look at how it holds it up. You guys know I have no eyebrows, but I thought I'd throw that in here. Hi, we're back. This week is Miss Tina Turner. I'm gonna try to do this look right here. If you guys don't follow Yuki, you should be. And I've already done my brows, my base, and I'm going to, notice in my last video I said like a million times. The amount of I had to edit out was ridiculous. So we're gonna try not to do that today. So I have the Devinah here, and then Copacetic on this. I'll do my interpretation of Yuki's look. I think I may have to take these earrings off because they're very jingly. I'm using my rougher brushes today. They are dirty. No shame. I have put on, as you saw before, the e.l.f. Cooling Mint Primer. I'm also going to be using the new Midas Cosmetics X Drench Cosmetics Genesis palette. Nars Matte and Chantilly Light 1 as my eye base. Let us dive in. Making Miss Turner a Sagittarius, and I myself am a Sagicorn. I was born on the cusp, but I get along very well. These are my people. In a yearbook, it said next to her name that she wanted to be an entertainer. She had no formal dance or vocal lessons, no music training whatsoever. It was just all natural, God-given talent. If I'm hoarse, I got no sleep this weekend. I sang yesterday. She's on the struggle bus today. She was known as Anna May, which is ironic because my daughter is Hannah May, and my grandmother was Annie Mae. She had a sister named Vannie Mae and another sister named Fannie Mae. Can you tell? We're from the South. She grew up in a 2-room sharecropper's shack in Nutbush, Tennessee. Her parents, Floyd and Zelma Bullock, worked in a factory, and her father also was the overseer of a cotton farm. He was a deacon at the local Baptist church, and she started singing there when she was really young. She said black gospel and blues were her roots. Her and her sister Aileen sang in the choir, but despite her many talents and gifts, Tina was a lonely girl. So she would turn on the radio and listen to radio dramas, and it was a way for her to escape. She was also obsessed with Hollywood and said that women like Lucille Ball and Loretta Young were her role models. She never thought she could be like them because, you know, she didn't have all the trappings. She didn't have the jewelry. She didn't have the clothes. And she just didn't have the means to look like them. And she thought she wasn't very pretty, which makes me incredibly sad because she's literally one of the most gorgeous women on the planet. So her parents fought constantly, and in 1949, when she was only 10, her mother just walked out and abandoned them. She couldn't take the fighting and the turmoil, and it was just too much. So she left, but in doing so, she also abandoned her kids. Her father, Floyd, would remarry, but it was the same thing, and soon he too would leave them. They moved in with relatives, and of course, this made Tina feel unloved and abandoned, as it would any of us, as some of us know, when a parent leaves. She never felt wanted. For a while, she and Eileen, I think it's Eileen, because Eileen is E-I-L, right? Aileen, Aileen. Aileen would go with a half-sister and her cousin Margaret and her auntie and uncle. Not long after that, though, Aileen moved to St. Louis with their mother. And Anna Mae moved in with her grandmother, who did love her very, very much. She was very loved by her grandmother and very, very, very close to her. Her cousin Margaret and her were like sisters. And when Margaret became pregnant, Tina was the only one she told. So she really confided in Tina. She was more like a sister than a cousin. I think some of us, if you grow up near your family, your cousins are as big a part of your family as your siblings, you know. Sometimes you tend to be closer to them. So she would talk to Aileen, and now that Aileen was living in St. Louis in the big city, Anna Mae was kind of jealous. She would hear all the stories at the big city, all the music, all the nightlife, and soon she would grow tired of Little Nutbush. She wanted to experience the city life like her sister. So she packed up and moved to St. Louis with her mom and Aileen. Well, she didn't really care about being with her mom. Her mom abandoned her, so she's like, whatever. There was always tension there. Their relationship was really strained, and it was described as combative, as you can imagine. It was understandable. But she loved Aileen with all her heart, and Aileen loved her. They were each other's kind of everything. Not long after moving to St. Louis, Tina would get the tragic news that Margaret was killed in a car accident. And it was especially devastating knowing that Margaret was pregnant. She realized in that moment how short life is and how precious it is. So that gave her the motivation to want to make something, you know, of her own life, not waste it. In 1956, Miss Anna Mae was 16 and Aileen was 19. And they started frequenting the Club Manhattan, and it was the hip place in St. Louis for the black community. She pestered her sister to go along. Like, her sister would get all dolled up and go out, and she didn't want little sis tagging along. But finally, she gave in, and she took her along, but she had to dress her up. So she loaned her best dress and made her up to look like, hopefully fool people into thinking she was 21. And she took her to Club Manhattan. Well, that fateful night would change history and the course for Tina's life. The Kings of Rhythm were playing that night, and the frontman was guitarist Ike Turner. She said it was a trance when she saw him play. It wasn't a crush. She just really admired him as a performer and as a musician. She jokingly said, well, I guess she wasn't joking, but she said he was ugly, and that she told him that. She's like, no, I don't like you like that. You're not my type. You're kind of ugly. But he was an amazing musician, and she was dying to sing with him. So she asked to sing for him, and he said, I'll call you. Which, we know what that means. That's when you're trying to blow somebody off. But she showed up every night until he finally gave her a mic, and he was stunned when he heard her. She belted out a version of B.B. King's You Know I Love You. Great song. Now, Ike saw the way the crowd responded to her, So he made her one of his regular singers. He bought her a wardrobe, he spoiled her. I mean, the jewelry, the clothes, the furs. And he put her into the act. And she would be going to school during the day, being a regular old 16-year-old. And then at night, she was dressing up like a star and singing in some of the hottest clubs in St. Louis with the Rhythm Kings, who were a fairly popular band. Now, Ike was from near Memphis. And the fun fact for this video is that his mom practically raised B.B. King, which I found fascinating. I'm such a dork. Fascinating. It is said that Ike Turner, and he may have said this, because I didn't hear anybody else say it, that Ike Turner recorded the first actual rock and roll album. That could have been him puffing himself up. All tea, all shade. But the first song they claim was Rocket 88, which is a good song. Came out in 1951. And when it came out, his sax player was actually credited with it. Yeah, his sax player got the credit. So, he had a huge chip on his shoulder because he didn't get the accolade. Which, to be fair, if I wrote a song and somebody else got credit for it, I'd probably be a little pissed. Another fateful day was in November of 1956, November 5th to be exact. The Kings of Rhythm were going in to record A Fool in Love. And Tina was just supposed to go to be a backup singer. But the guy who was supposed to show up and sing it didn't show. Miss Tina filled in. I don't know whether to call her Anime at this point. She's still Anime at this point. She's not Tina yet. May filled in. And it was a hit. It went to number 2 on the R&B charts. And the contract started rolling in. When the contract started coming in, that's when Ike changed her name to Tina Turner. Because he thought if he gave her his last name, people would assume she was taken and not mess with her. So he was so scared she was going to leave the group because she made the group. People loved her. By the way, I'm wearing my Breakfast Club t-shirt. For all my 80s and 90s babies out there. Five Below, y'all. Five Below has some good t-shirts. See, Ike knew that Tina was his meal ticket. And he was terrified that she would leave the group. But he couldn't let that happen. She was actually pregnant with her first son, Craig, at the time. And Craig was not Ike's. They were not a thing. She wasn't feeling him. And the sax player was Craig's daddy. A lot of people assumed Craig was his. Craig was not his. So Ike adds a group of backup singers called the Ikeettes. Can we say narcissism? I'm not a psychologist, but just saying. Allegedly, for entertainment purposes. People said that the backup singers, if they did good, they got to ride in the caddy. If they made a mistake, they had to ride in the bus. Sir. But the youngest was a 15-year-old white girl named Bonnie Bramlett. And he actually had to get legal custody of her so that she could travel with them across state lines. Because y'all gotta remember, this was a different time. And a little white girl riding around with a black man, or black men, would get them harassed and raise eyebrows. Which, to be fair, we haven't come too much farther these days. And there's a funny story. Funny's not the right word. Not funny, haha. But they were driving down the road. And the girls, all the Ikeettes, were in the car, including 15-year-old white girl, Bonnie. And this carload of obnoxious boys, white, started following them and harassing them. And yeah, they were mad because it was a carload of black people with a white girl in it. And they were cussing them. They were saying filthy, disgusting, racist things. And calling them the N-word. So Ike stopped the car. Ike got out with a gun. He scared them off, but he realized they had a problem. He had fought for, you know, to get Bonnie on the tour and everything, got legal custody of her, talked to her parents. This man's solution to the problem was to go out and buy what they called Mantan, which was a tanning solution, like wig, fake tan, everything. He had a steady stream of gigs though, well-paying gigs. It was mostly in the R&B clubs and the soul clubs. That's where Ike tended to book them. There wasn't much of a divergence between like soul music and rock and roll. They were trying to cross over, but it was like black people have R&B and soul, white people have rock and roll. There was no crossing, you know what I'm saying, of the roads. So in 1962, Ike decided to move everyone to California. And his whole relationship with Tina was built on fear. Fear of losing her. Fear of losing his money when Tina would leave, should she do so. He knew if he lost her, he'd have nothing. But Tina thought if she lost her mentor, she'd wind up back in Nutbush. And she definitely didn't want that. He wanted to make her his girlfriend, and sis just kind of went with it. She was young, she was a baby, she was naive, she didn't know any better. She didn't know she could stand on her own 2 feet, so that was that. And this man would spank her, y'all. It's so sad because she said she missed the days when it was fun. You know, they would play shows and she actually enjoyed it. She said she felt like a little slave girl, and soon nothing she did on stage meant anything to her. And that's sad when somebody can take something you love and ruin it for you. If y'all haven't watched the documentary on HBO, I highly recommend it. I got a lot of what Tina said from that documentary because a lot of that's in her words. I watched some other stuff too, but I found that that one was really good because in that one, she herself spoke on a lot of stuff. It wasn't just hearsay. And Ike did too. But also her bubby. Her husband. Now. Who is just the most amazing man. But anyway. So Ike has ruined singing for Tina. Thank you very much. But by the mid-60s, they had a record deal with Warner Brothers. They were touring all over the U.S., so they decided to sit down and have a little chat about the arrangements. But Ike did not give her a choice. I mean, it wasn't much of a talk. She was there to be told what she was going to do. And she said, like, okay, so trigger warning, we're going to go into some of the stuff now. But she said the first time he touched her, she felt so ashamed, like he wasn't supposed to be doing what he was doing. She didn't see him as a partner. She saw him as a mentor. So it's the power thing, the power dynamic, which is why it's the first reason why it's abuse. He's older, there's a power over her. But it was like a brother-sister relationship. It felt weird, but he told her, this is how it's gonna be, and she didn't have much of a choice. And when she protested, he would beat her. One time he beat her so bad with a shoe stretcher. I don't know if you know what those are, but it's got like a piece of plastic or rubber on one end and a piece of plastic on the other end, and there's a piece of metal in between it, and you expand it and then you put it in your shoe. But he beat her with that. She was battered, she was hurt, and she said that the disgusting part of it was every time he would beat her, he would want to be intimate with her, which is just so morbid. So twisted, so disgusting. She says this would happen every time he would beat her and then have his way with her. Like, what kind of sick, twisted piece of... She said, though, that this would happen every single time he would beat her and blame her and said she made him do it. How many times have we heard that? So she was scared, but she felt obligated to stay. He had done so much for her. Had her brainwashed. She said she'd sometimes even feel sorry for him. after he beat her, he took her to Tijuana one time, and they got married. What could she do? Say no? No. So after they got married, they were playing 3 or 4 shows a night. He'd make her rehearse constantly. And this man would monetarily fine musicians who hit a wrong note. Sir. So the only real freedom Tina had was dancing. And people started to see that there was more to Tina than just being one of Ike's girls. So Phil Spector came along. Y'all know who Phil Spector is? Now Phil's a whole other story. Phil was a little bat crap, if you know what I mean. But he was good at what he did. So he was a hit maker, and he wanted to do a project with Tina. Well, Ike he wanted to be a part of it. Jealous as he was. But Phil didn't want Ike. He wanted Tina. So Ike, you are not necessary, was what he was told. And Phil wanted Ike nowhere near the studio. So he paid a babysitter for Ike. He paid someone to occupy Ike. Which would happen again. Because nobody liked Ike. Ike was a butthole. So in '66, Phil Spector offered Tina $20,000 to record. As much as Ike loved the money, he did think about possibly losing his investment, which was Tina. He saw her as an investment, as property, but if he was going to, the money better be good. And it was. I think my lighting just changed a little bit. I'm sorry. Let us underpaint. Phil and Ike, though, were kind of like birds of a feather. Drugs, money, women. Hard eye roll. But she was so excited. She recorded River Deep, Mountain High in '66. And it was really something different for her. But it just didn't do very well. And pop radio said it was too black. R&B radio said it was too white. Lord, they didn't know what to do with that thing. But despite that, they were asked to be one of the opening acts for the upcoming Rolling Stones tour, which was huge for them. It was Ike, Tina, the Yardbirds. There were several. So during the tour, Mick Jagger became friends with Tina, and he actually credits his dance style with what she and P.P. Arnold taught him on that tour. P.P. Arnold was one of her backup dancers and singers. She's also amazing. So it's now 1970 in LA, and with the money from the Rolling Stones tour, Ike built his studio. And why is that looking like? Okay, it's not that bad. He was a taskmaster and a sass master. Drug fueled, he would mercilessly drive Tina into the ground, making her work constantly and running. This man was running on cocaine and booze. Like, we thought David Bowie was bad with his cocaine and milk. Well, Mr. Ike added to it. I know this looks crazy. It'll get better. Promise. Maybe. But he would stay up. Let me pin this hair back. This little bit of hair I got. So he would stay up days and weeks at a time. And it's sad because, to his credit, Ike Turner was incredibly talented. Like, there's no denying that. There's no denying his contribution to rock and roll, which is why he is in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame as well. He's an amazing blues guitarist. He's an amazing songwriter. He was very innovative for his time, but his behavior discredited him. And that is a lesson for all of us. He hurt his own career by his drug use and his reputation by so egregiously mistreating our girl. And the beatings were so awful that if you notice at one point, it looked like Tina had a nose job. But Ike had bashed her in the face and hurt her so badly, she had to have her entire nose rebuilt. Now, to hear her kids talk about her, what is happening? It twists, Bethany. To hear her kids talk about her, and she had 4 boys, to hear her kids talk about her. She was a really strict mama. She was a good mama. But here's to me one of the saddest things of all of this. Ike was jealous of her kids. And she would come home from tour, and those babies would run to see her, and Ike's like, go to your room. Those babies hadn't seen their mom in like 3 or 4 months, and he was upset that they wanted time with her. That made me so sad. She said in the interview that the boys, they just wanted their mama. Ike would send them to their rooms. It's just so freaking sad. And Tina never had friends. Her son Craig said she was really sad a lot. It just really pisses me off. He was so controlling. She never had any of her own money. All that money she made, none of it was ever hers. She had a tiny allowance that he gave her every week. It just really, I mean, if you want to cry, watch the documentary. You'll cry. The length, like, I get teary-eyed thinking about it. Like, the length of time that she put up with what she did and what her kids went through. And what it did to her kids. And I'm not going to go into it, so I'll just mention it here. But Craig, I think he was 59, he committed suicide, her oldest boy. So you know they just all went through it. I don't know. Okay, so I'm going to go over all this with the Nars All Day Luminous Weightless Foundation and Mont Blanc. So it's 1971, Proud Mary was released, and any affection she ever had for Ike was gone. He had put her through hell, but the woman was nothing if not loyal. So Proud Mary became a hit. Also, self-promotion, if that's okay, it is my channel. I make these resin palettes, if anybody wants one. This one's dirty, but no palettes. In 1971, Proud Mary became a hit. Then in 1973, Tina had the opportunity to write her own song finally. And what did she write about? Nutbush City. And the song Nutbush City Limits came out. And that song, guys, you gotta listen to it. It's awesome. And for those who don't know, I'm a songwriter also. Songs are like your babies. And so when they do well, it's something very special. So Ike was spiraling using the BK 101 today for foundation. So Ike was spiraling. He wouldn't take any advice, any direction on the band, from the band. His drug use was costing them a fortune. And he was more awful to her than ever. And one night, Tina broke. She had been taking sleeping pills to sleep. She was never a drug user. These were prescribed to her, and she did not abuse them. They were just asleep. One night, she took 50 Valium before a show, and her plan was to collapse on stage. Like, she wanted to go out embarrassing Ike. And I don't mean to laugh, but like, she's like, if I'm doing this, you're going down with me. So she wanted to collapse on stage, but she never made it to the stage, and she was taken to the hospital. She was taken to the hospital. Her stomach was pumped. When she regained consciousness, Ike's first words to her were, are you trying to ruin my life? You know what? If Tina was my friend, I could have been sleeping with the fishes. So first, thank God she didn't succeed. And second, she tried to make Ike understand, but he didn't, and he didn't want to hear it. And so he beat her as soon as she got home. She got an actual beating for trying to kill herself because of how miserable she was with this man. I mean, there are no words. Sir, your dog hair is becoming a problem. Sir, he doesn't care. Sir, would you like to say hi? would you like to say hi to the friends? Maybe later? He said maybe later. So things went on as usual. And in 1975, Tina was offered the leading role in the movie version of The Who's rock opera, Tommy. She had never done drugs in her life. And this role revolves around the Acid Queen. So she had to draw from somewhere. So she drew from her experiences with Ike. And Ike hated the fact that she was getting the attention and the roles. But once again, the money was too good for him to say no. It is said that her performance stole the show. Of course it did. I know sometimes when we do underpainting, we don't really see it. But in person, it's easier to see. These lights kind of blow everything out. But you can still kind of see the contour and definitely the glow. So it was after the Who performance in their movie that she began to see herself as more. She began to see herself as not just Ike and Tina, that she was her own entity. And she began gaining more self-confidence. And Ike began to lose control. It was 1976 and they were driving to an airport in Dallas, Texas. It was July 3rd. And she said he hit her. And she doesn't know what it was about that time, but she's decided within herself, I'm not taking this anymore. And she hit him back. I would have loved to have been a fly in that car and seen Ike's face when she finally whopped him one time. And she said to him, in her words, I'm not going to take your licks anymore. She started hitting him back. And by the time they got to the Hilton, they were bloody and swollen. They got to the room, and I guess it had calmed down. And she said, I gave him a massage, and he fell asleep. And when he did, that's when she got her stuff and walked out for the last time. Tina walked out of her marriage with Ike with 36 cents in her pocket. The next day, she had to call her attorney and get him to send her a plane ticket. She didn't have any money. None. 36 cents, that's all she had. Like literally. Not in an account. Not stashed away. I didn't give her anything. He spent it all. Or hid it. Like, she had nothing. So, this man left with nothing. So, the next day, she flew home and went into hiding. That was July 4th, 1976. The bicentennial year for this country. And Tina's Independence Day. And I have no reason to doubt her. She says that he sent people to intimidate her, to shoot up her house. I said, I believe it. If it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, it's a dang duck. So when he realized this woman, oh, she looking ghostly. So when he realizes that she's not coming back, this man has the balls to sue her. He sues her for broken contracts and club dates that they were gonna miss, which he could go do them. It just wouldn't include her. The biggest douchebag thing I think he did was tried to keep her name. And so when they went to court, she said, you can have everything. All I want is my name. And the judge gave it to her. She told him in court, you've taken everything from me over the last 16 years. I'm taking my future. And she felt like her name was part of her future, and it was. So at 37 years old, Tina left everything she knew. She was on food stamps. She offered to clean people's houses. She stayed with friends. Any small-time gigs. Whatever she had to do to take care of her and her boys. She'd play anywhere. She booked TV shows. She was on like Hollywood Squares. Should I just give up on this daggone barrette? So 2 years later, she had put a band back together, and they were touring. They were playing in clubs again. Las Vegas, Florida, Canada. In '79, Roger Davies was organizing Hollywood Nights. I don't know if you guys remember that. A long time ago. I was little. I don't remember it, but maybe some of you do. I wasn't born until '76. But anyway, he did this show as a special with Olivia Newton-John, and he asked her to be on the special. Through that connection, he decided he wanted to manage her. And he loved Tina, but he thought her act was too Vegasy. And if you remember from my last one, Bowie went through an era like that too. Now, Roger also felt that her band was taking advantage of her too. They were taking way too much of a cut from her, and they were kind of riding her coattails. So he fired them all. And he flat out asked her, what do you want to do? And she said she wanted to be the first black artist to sell out stadiums. And so she cut the hair. They put together a rock show. It took 18 months. But they didn't want this to be like a comeback. Because she wasn't coming back. Like, she was never... Ike and Tina, that was never truly her. That was all Ike. She wanted to come out. This was her debut. This was not a comeback. So record sales in the UK and Europe were booming, but not in the US. They just could not get a deal here. They felt... Roger thought it was because of Ike that he was just too tied to him. When they thought of Tina Turner, they thought of Ike Turner. So Roger asked if she'd be willing to tell the story of what happened between her and Ike. So she agreed. She wanted to know, or she wanted people to know that the fairy tale was a lie. And no one talked about physical, sexual, marital abuse back then. So she was, of course, terrified. But on December 7th, 1981, Tina gave an interview to People magazine to tell her story. And this was the first time she had ever told this story to anyone in her own words. And after this happened, people were finally for her. She finally got a development deal with Capitol Records. But as soon as she did, their new management cut her. And John Carter, the one who signed her, went to bat for her. And evidently, they said, the new people said some really horrible racist things. Debated on whether to put it in here. But I will, because I want you to know, like, the type of thing she was going up against, even with her own record label. They said, why did you bring us this old N-word? So he literally got down on his hands and knees and begged them to keep her. And they said, fine, but this is on you. If it fails, you're fired, and we're not putting a dime into her. And John said, fine, just keep her. So they decided to go to London because Europe loved her. Am I saying Europe has more sense than the United States? Maybe. Maybe not. When it comes to Tina Turner, they do. They got her. So she said England immediately felt like home. And in '82, while she was there, David Bowie, we just circling back around. David Bowie was meeting with his new label, EMI, who also happened to be Tina's UK label and sister company to Capitol. Bowie invited his record execs to come to her concert with him, and they finally, after seeing her, got behind her show. 2 days later, she said she was disappointed because after the show she didn't hear from him, but then she got a call 2 days later and they offered her an action. Okay, so there's a difference between a development deal and a record deal. And a development deal just means they're willing to work with you and help you. But a record deal actually means they will pay for you to make music, get behind you with tours, things like that. So on that album, her first US hit was a cover of the Al Green hit, Let's Stay Together. It was number 6 on Billboard and garnered her first Grammy nomination for Best Female R&B Artist. And her first European tour was so successful that 30 dates had to be added. And this was the start of Tina. She never knew what home felt like until she came to Europe. And which is why she's still there today. So Roger, her manager, got Terry Britton, his hero, to write some songs for Tina. And they brought her What's Love Got to Do with It. And she hated it. This was pop and she was rock and roll. But she tried to sing it. She added her own style. That album she knocked out in 2 weeks. I think working with Ike prepared her for pretty much anything. It sold an amazing 20 million copies. And it went to number 1. Martin Ware was a co-producer on it. And he said that It's the only vocal he's ever worked on that was done in one single take. Beginning to end, it was perfect. Sorry, why am I waving this at you? For instance, Chaka Khan took 17 takes for one of her hits. He said it's the one and the only time he's ever seen it. Just Tina, just What's Love Got to Do with It. Only time it's ever happened to him. Why are you barking, sir? Little sir. What does this dog want? Come here. Come say hi. Don't you love me more? This is Bowie. This is my Bowie. Where's your face? I can't even see your face. Look at your face. Look at your face. Oh! Rawr. I love you. Sir, can I kiss you? No. He hates me. I love you. He could care less. So, Private Dancer was her next hit, written by Mark Knopfler of Dire Straits. And y'all, she was 50 years old. This doesn't happen anymore. Like, I'm 44. I've been told I have a foot and a half in the grave. So the Private Dancer debuted at #1, and it stayed there for an astonishing 9 months, and it sold 5 million copies. That year, Rolling Stone magazine awarded her Artist of the Year, Female Vocalist of the Year, R&B Artist of the Year, Album of the Year, and Single of the Year. And What's Love Got to Do with It became the biggest hit ever on Billboard, and it remains one of the top selling albums of all time. It won 4 Grammys. Now we know Queen Bee has beaten that, but still, Tina did it first. Miss Ma'am. So I'm going to use a couple different LA Girl liners. So Tina was the biggest pop star in the world, and while still on tour, she got a call from Australian director, sorry, this is very hard to do and talk, from Australian director George Miller, and asked if she would star in Mad Max. Tina fulfilled a childhood dream and went to Hollywood. Now, I'm going to put in pictures of her in Mad Max. Y'all tell me she ain't that chick. I mean, look at her. So Tina was so happy, and finally, on another fateful day in London, the final missing piece would be put into place. When she arrived in England, that day she got picked up by a record executive named Erwin Bach. And Tina was 15 years older than him. Within weeks, they were inseparable. And I'm going to go into that a little more later. Now, even though she was a star in her own right, people refused to stop bringing up Ike. She wanted to talk about the future. So Kurt Loder, my 90s kids, do you remember Kurt Loder? MTV VJ. But he's actually a real journalist. Just a VJ. This is quite the Luke. Kurt Loder approached Roger about her writing a book, and he wanted the whole story. Now, she had talked a lot about it in that People interview. He wanted more in-depth, than just a short interview could cover. So she wrote I, Tina, and hoped it would get the journalist off her back. Her story has helped so many people release, what she says is release their own secret shame. Mama, she went on Oprah, and Oprah did her whole Tina Turner thing. I will put in a picture of all the letters they got in that women wrote in saying how her book gave them the courage to leave their own abusive relationships and how to break free and have their own life. It was amazing. I think it was like 50,000. It was really cool. So that same year, the album Break Every Rule was released. Single Typical Male was #1. She won another Grammy for Back Where You Started. In the spring of that year, she started a 55-week tour in 13 countries, performed 230 shows, including a Guinness Book of World Records show in Rio de Janeiro. And she performed there for a record-breaking crowd of 184,000 people. Look at all these people. For the first time ever, she had complete control over every aspect of her life. So her next album, Born Affair, remained in the charts for 70 weeks, selling 14 million copies. It featured the now classic, The Best. And if you're a Schitt's Creek fan, please comment below if you're a Schitt's Creek fan. I can't. It's such a good cover. I'm going to link that video below because it's a great cover. But I'm also going to link Tina's info. Tina's on Instagram, y'all. Tina's on the gram. Follow her. Now, the song was originally written for Paul Young, but he passed on it. Tina heard it, and she loved it, but she wanted a bridge. So it was rewritten for Tina and adding the bridge. That each time I lose you, I start losing control. That part. That year, Tina and Ike were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Now, interesting turn of events. Unfortunately, poor pitiful Ike couldn't make it to the induction. He missed his big day. Why, you ask? He had a prior engagement with the California State Penitentiary due to some drug charges, so he missed it. He accepted for them both. Sad. So in 1993, the movie What's Love Got to Do With It came out, starring Angela Bassett. I love her so much. And Lawrence Fishburne. He played Ike. And do you know that this man showed up to set? Ike Turner. He brought his broke, busted behind to that set. And Angela Bassett said, "No ma'am, no ham, no turkey." So they got rid of him. He was not allowed on set. They cut him his little check for the rights to play Ike, which they had to do, and told him that he was not allowed on set and to stay away from Tina. You just heard they're doing a movie about you and you just showed up. Tina trained Angela for the part. I think it's Angela Bassett's best performance. Again, I love her to begin with. So the movie brought in $45 million, and former Ikeette Bonnie, though, remember little Bonnie, white girl Bonnie? She said Fishburne's portrayal of Ike was awful, and I don't know why. She didn't elaborate, and I don't care enough about Ike Turner to look into it. So, but yeah, she said his portrayal wasn't good. She just said that wasn't Ike. I don't know why she said it, but she said it. I will cut you with this wing. I will cut Ike Turner with this wing. My eyes are so hooded. Why am I the way that I am? Anyway, she was now the undisputed queen of rock and roll. And after 4 decades on the road, she announced that there would be no more tours. I mean, the woman wore herself slap out. On December 6th of 2000, the last month of the last millennium, she found herself in a position that she never thought she would be in. She was finally individually successful and finally stable for the rest of her life. She knew she'd never have to work again. And in 2004, she released an anthology called What Else? The Best. Erwin says she still doesn't like to talk about things. It sounded to me like there's PTSD, which why wouldn't there be? I mean, she had reconnected with her mom, when she moved back to St. Louis, but her mom was always really awful to her. And you can watch interviews with her and her mom. Her mom just, man, something's wrong with the way she sees things. And I'm sorry. I don't mean to talk bad about somebody's mama, but I just feel like, I don't know. She stated that she never really ever received love from her mother. I don't know. Like I said before, their relationship was contemptuous. She still did for her mom. Like, she still did for her. She bought her a house and she took care of her and everything. And somebody once asked her, why do you still do that for your mom? And she said, I'm just going to treat her as if she does love me. And that broke my freaking heart. Like, oh my gosh. Like what an amazing woman. She still chose to treat her as if she had been a good mom. Not a lot of people can do that. Not a lot of people can get past, nor should they be, what's the word I'm looking for? Nor should they be expected to. But I think it takes an amazing human being to be hurt the way Tina had and still choose to love that person. Not I quit mama. But she said she never ever received love from anyone. Not real love. Not one love affair. Not her parents. But that was until she met Erwin. She said in an interview, she said, I want a strong man. I want a man who wears the pants. But I don't want a man who dominates me. I'm going to put on some did my liner. I'll put on some lashes and I'll be right back. Mascara and lashes. Okay, I'm back, and evidently I have chosen violence with this lash. We're talking about the queen of rock and roll, so y'all get your lashes and your lipstick at the beauty supply. These are like $2.99, and they are matte, and they stay put forever. So Tina, like we said, she wanted a strong man, but she didn't want a man that dominated her. And so I had talked about it before. Erwin picked her up from the airport when she was going to London. I'm going to cover my lip while I'm doing this because I can't see without it. But he picked her up from the airport, and she was quite a bit younger than him. He was only 30. She was in her 50s. He robbed that cradle. And she said he was beautiful. And he was very handsome, as you can see. She was so happy because when they got ready to leave the airport, he's like, why don't you ride with Erwin? And she was like, schoolgirl. And Erwin said he enjoyed her as an artist, but what attracted him was he just loved talking to her, like in the car. They were just talking and talking, and he just kind of fell in love with her as a person. They would not, however, get married. Like I said, they were inseparable from the beginning, but they would not get married for another 27 years. It was a very, very, very long engagement, but it's so cute. And he's got this accent, and he's like, there was always this electrical charge between us, and I just left her 3 hours ago, and I still feel it. And I was like, my heart. I'm so happy for her. So at age 76, Ike Turner died, and Tina said that she now tries to just focus on the good. There were good times when he first found her and they first started, making music. He was good to her back then, and she tries to focus on that. And she says she finally forgave him and let go. But she said that what helped her forgive him was that she realized Ike was just a very, very sick person. There was just something fundamentally wrong with how he saw things and how he treated people. She was eventually able to forgive him. Now, she was asking the HBO documentary, she was asking herself, she's like, she's getting to the end of her life, and she's like, how do I just go away? How do I just bow out slowly? And that was never something that was obvious to her. But in 2018, she had some health issues, and she needed a kidney transplant. And again, with this love story, Erwin gave her one of his kidneys. And the fact that he was a match even to be able to give her a kidney, they're just so meant to be. I love them as a couple. Yeah, Erwin gave her one of his kidneys, and she gradually began to get better. And she said at one point, she was very transparent, they live in Switzerland, and Switzerland has a assisted suicide law, and they actually have clinics where you can go and you can bow out on your own. She said she made an appointment, and she was ready to just bow out of life because she was in so much pain and she was suffering with her illness. So she decided that that's what she was going to do. But fortunately, she's still with us because Erwin helped her out and gave her one of his kidneys, and she's doing a lot better. In 2019, the musical Tina opened on Broadway, and so when that happened, she told Erwin, she's like, well, why don't I do this? Why don't I go to America? I'll say goodbye, and I'll just wrap up my career there. And she got to be honored in a way that she deserved, and now there's this legacy she's left behind. And this would be just this needed closure to an amazing career. Tina, today, is 81. She does still have some health issues, but she's 81. But she's enjoying retirement, fulfilled and happy with the love of her life in a chateau in Zurich, Switzerland. So it sounds like she finally got her happily ever after. If anyone deserves it, it's Tina. We love Tina over here. Let me know what you thought about this video and what you suggest for other videos. And I will see you guys next time. Please don't forget to like before you go. Please leave me comments. I love talking to you guys. Subscribe. And if you would, please share. I'm trying to obviously grow the channel. I'm very small. If you could help me out, I'd appreciate it. All right. See you guys.